Welcome to another episode dedicated to the folklore of the trees, and this time we will look at a very witchery tree, one with a darker folkloric aspect, although beautiful still, and often full of pretty fruits. Today we are going to take a look at the folklore of the Blackthorn. Blackthorn is a beautiful little tree. Where we used to live, we would walk our dogs along the back countryside lanes and eventually get to a gate of a field. Heaven knows how long this gateway had been there, but it was built into a Devon bank. These are the edges of fields built up high and high, and often topped by native shrubs and trees and wildflowers, and these are now habitats for so many birds and animals and insects and such. They are true liminal spaces, and homes for the good folk and fairies also. Anyway, back to the lane and the field and the gate. This opening, well, it wasn't used so much, and our local farmer friend had roped it shut. Well, what was left of the old wooden gate was roped to a big metal hook in the bank, and at the left hand of this gate was a smallish but obviously really old blackthorn tree. Now, this is not unusual in Devon nor in the UK anywhere, but this tree had the biggest sloe berries that Marc or I had ever seen. These things were huge. Usually they're about the size of a grape. These things were the size of a small plum. Lovely things, deep purple black with a blue blush, but bitter as all sloes are. And seeing this tree with its strange large fruits, always without fail, got us talking about the folklore and uses of the fruits and the blackthorn wood. A tree known as the mother of the woods, the dark crone of the woods. It is the first tree that graces us with bountiful white blossoms in early spring, and these are sometimes tinged with a little pink and are always a welcome sight. Summer brings the leaves, and as fall comes upon us, those deep purple-black sloe berries fill the branches, heavy bitter fruits but filled with vitamins, a harvest for the birds and the animals and also people. In winter it is a mass of strong, thin, spindly branches, and now empty of leaves, these reveal sharp thorns that give the tree its name. This little tree is usually found in hedgerows in Britain, or on the edges of the woodlands where elder trees and hawthorns are often also found, magical fairy trees in magical fairy groves. It is a hard wood when polished, and due to its strength was often used for walking sticks and weapons. It is strong enough to take the weight of those who need some extra help, and because of its vicious long thorns it was often used for hedging farmers' fields and keeping livestock in and intruders out. And of course it is a tree full of folklore and a usage of magic stretching back into history, and some of these we will look at today. The blackthorn is a widely used tree for so many purposes, and as already said, the fruit is also full of vitamins and has a rich, bitter taste. The wood is strong and dense. Sloe berries are most often used to flavour alcohols and gins and vodkas, not just in the UK but also in the Basque regions of Spain, among many others. The sloes are famed for their use this way in many countries. I am fascinated by this fruit. It is full of health-giving goodness, and yet so damn bitter. However, in times past when nothing would have been wasted as food in the countryside, what else would it have been used for? Surely not just alcohols or jams. But I have found next to nothing of recipes to use this little fruit. So I would be very grateful if any of you lovely listeners could tell me, have you heard of any recipes for sloe berries? It is blackthorn wood though, that is its treasure for craftspeople, the hardness little surpassed for many uses. In Ireland it was famed for making the shillelagh, the cudgel, originally named for the forests of Shillelagh in County Wicklow, where many of these trees grew. All young boys were once trained to use this weapon as a means of defence. Although other woods were sometimes used, the blackthorns are plentiful in Ireland, and the root has a natural bulbous shape, perfect for the knobbled end of a cudgel. To make the shillelagh wood even harder, it would be cured in a dung or compost heap, or smeared with Irish butter and placed in the chimney to season in the cottage fire smoke. It is said that the Fianna, the ancient peoples of Ireland, had a blackthorn staff bound with iron and full of spikes for battle, and even these warriors were afraid of being hit with one of these spikes, as the wounds would be terrible and very often turn septic. Even to this day in Northern Ireland, officers from the Royal Irish Regiment carry blackthorn sticks as decorative accessories. As a wood once processed for artisan craftsmanship, the heartwood is so dense that once sanded it becomes extremely smoothed and polished, and has a beautiful honey colour. Here and there might be darker speckles where the thorns once grew, and often this honey colour will also have red or orange patches of natural blood-like colouring. In ancient Greece, blackthorn was used as a drilling stick to create enough heat to make fire, and in the case of blackthorn, this was always used for sacred fires. The sticks in Greece were also used to ward off evil magic and witches. And yet in most of Europe, it is and was considered a tree used by witches for sorcery. As a firewood it is slow burning, producing much heat and little smoke. Even the sap of this intriguing little tree was used in the Middle Ages as an additive in the creation of some inks for manuscripts, and the sharp thorns too would be used as hooks for bait when fishing. The juice of the crushed sloe berries was used in dyeing linen, starting off as a deep red or purple, and then after washing and processing it would turn a lovely shade of blue. Absolutely nothing of the blackthorn was wasted. And so to the fruit, the sloe berry, looking like a little plum and virtually black or purple with a blue blush. As I have already said, it is packed with nutrients and yet is as bitter can be, unless it is picked after the first autumn frosts. This effect can be mimicked by freezing gathered sloe berries to remove some of that strange tartness. And the fruit, as I have said, is used in gins and vodkas and even to make a type of port wine. In Navarre in Spain it is used to create the liquor called pacharan. A similar alcoholic drink in France is called épinette, created by processing young shoots gathered in the spring. And Italy too has a boozy brew made from blackthorn, mixed with sugar and spirits called bagnolino. And alcohols similar to these can be found all over Europe. Otzi, the 5,300-year-old ice mummy found in the Otzal Alps between Italy and Austria, was discovered with a little sloe berry close to his body, and it is believed that this would have formed part of his last meal should he have survived whatever befell him. Remains of these fruits, the stones from inside the sloe berries, have been found in many archaeological sites from the Mesolithic through to the Iron Ages. As I have said, the berries are rich in vitamins, and our ancient peoples knew the value of good foods gathered to help supplement diet and aid health. Today the berries make a beautiful jam and jelly, and are wonderful additions to chutneys and in-fruit pies. In the 1820s, when tea was becoming increasingly popular but also increasingly expensive, young dried blackthorn leaves would be added to the tea leaves as a filler. Have any of you tried a raw picked sloe? I haven't, but my husband Mark has when he was younger, and he said it was tasty but extremely bitter. Be careful though if you try one, because sometimes They are so astringent that your mouth will react by seeming to fill with weird fluff. And please, if any of you do have sloe recipes, pop them in the comments, because I would love to try using these pretty fruits in baking or cooking. So what of folk medicine? Because seriously, our ancestors knew so much about natural remedies, and as I have said, they wasted nothing. The extremely astringent sloe berry is known as a stimulant to the metabolism. It's also a laxative, a diuretic, and is good for the blood. Some of the health problems they were used for was with eczema, herpes, colds, catarrh, weak hearts, kidney stones, prostate and bladder problems. In the 16 and 1700s, the berries would be boiled to create a purge for strong stomach ailments. The leaves and the flowers, prepared as a tea, were used as a laxative, and also as a mouthwash to gargle for sore throats and tonsillitis. Dried fruits would also be used in medicines for bladder and kidney ailments, and also to purify the blood. Of course, because of the astringency of tonics created from young blackthorn sloes, the liquid was considered ideal for skin complaints, and also acne, to use as a wash and a cleaner. There are even modern companies today who use Sloe as an additive in creating face masks to improve skin elasticity. Our favourite Irish folklore collection tells, an old remedy for summer fevers and indigestion in children was to stew sloe leaves with clover blossom. Strain the liquid and take it after meals and rub the stewed leaves on the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet. If a white froth came on the mixture while it was stewing, it was a sign that the cure would be effective. We move now from practical uses to legend, myth, folklore and magic. Blackthorn is associated with personal change and transformation through strife and hardship, death and battle, and was always revered, although warily so, as it was always associated with negatives in life's journey. The colour of this tree denotes all of its characteristics: red sap representing blood, black bark and fruit for death, and white blossoms for the spirit. And so as a sacred tree, the blackthorn became associated with the Celtic festival of Imbolc, celebrated on February the 1st. The tree is the tree of the Cailleach, the ancient crone of death, the goddess of winter, she who freezes the earth with a strike of her blackthorn staff, and she rules the earth from Samhain at the end of October all the way through winter, through to Imbolc, when the goddess Briggs emerges with the early spring and renewed hope of better times. This process of hardship is necessary for the rebirth of spring, for Briggs to rise reborn from the ashes of the Cailleach. For the Celtic people, a blackthorn winter was the hardest type of season to come through and survive. The winter goddess was a cruel mistress for those who lived in a time so close to nature and so vulnerable to its whims. Even its name in Celtic Ogham, strafe, became strife over time, and this tells you everything you need to know about the blackthorn's harder, darker reputation. And so more about the Ogham, ancient language of small lines formed among a long one, and the blackthorn or strafe, one of the chieftain trees. In this language of trees, it is this tree that has the most sinister and the most frightening reputation. It is this letter that carries with it this reputation and its meaning: the death of all, the warrior's fight, blood red and spilt, the fight to survive, and the border between life and death. The time of the Ogham strife is Samhain, Halloween, 3 days of a liminal time where those who've passed can part the veil and return, and the border between life and death and the other world is at its thinnest. The blackthorn becomes the keeper and the increaser of dark secrets. And this liminal time echoes the liminal space where it is often found in Britain, on the edges of fields and on the edges of roads. Despite, or maybe because of its reverence to the ancient people, the blackthorn became a part of Christian folklore also, reputed to be one of the thorn trees used in the crown of Christ at his crucifixion. And because of this it became known as a tree that just might flower on Christmas Eve, bringing together the cycle of life and death for Christians. More Christian folklore tells us the devil finds a use for blackthorn thorns, using these vicious little natural shivs to prick those he has chosen for the underworld after their passing, the drop of blood sealing a pact to take the soul. Naturally, this being a primarily fairy-filled channel, we must look at blackthorn's place in fairy and folklore. Groves on the edge of woodlands, where these pretty trees grew alongside the hawthorn, were known to be places where fairies would meet and tryst. Liminal places again, that edge between the safe open land and the deep dark woodland, where absolutely anything magical or slightly dangerous can happen. And indeed anything does happen when we are looking at the blackthorn. It is these twisting, sharp-thorned trees that grew wildly around the castle where the sleeping beauty lay, captive under a spell from the wicked fairy, the castle slowly disappearing, hiding the enchanted castle and all its sleeping inhabitants from human eyes, until one good day a young prince and an adventurer came along. Of course it would be a blackthorn, after all, this was a dark evil magic conjured by a dark and evil fairy sorceress. Irish legend tells us that the blackthorn is used as a magical aid to help heroes, though. A single twig of this thrown behind a fleeing hero would cause a forest of blackthorn to spring up immediately, impossible for pursuers or even stomping giants to pass through or cut through. It is in Irish fairy lore that we find the blackthorn tree has its own fairy protector, the Lunantishi, the moon fairies, and these are a deadly threat to humans. Should you cut wood from one of their trees on Samhain or Imbolg, or even Beltane, you are done for. You are cursed by these powerful tree fairies. The only time it is truly safe to cut from the blackthorn of the Lunantishi is during the full moon, because it is now that these fairies will leave their trees to worship their moon goddess. And these trees have a long lineage in place. Young trees grow where old trees fall, in continuous legacy of protection of burial mounds or even ancient sacred places, places where the older folk, the fairies, would also be protecting. These fairies are said to be thin and wizened, reflecting the look of the blackthorn itself. They have sharp teeth and sharp-tipped long ears, mimicking the thorns of the tree, and are every bit as dangerous. Blackthorn in her guise as the mother of the woods was the tree that would top the maypole, twisted together with hawthorn branch, two very fairy trees represented in this ancient festival ritual. New Year rituals included making crowns of blackthorn and placing them in the hearth fire, gathering the ashes to sprinkle on the fields to bring fertility, and garlands of blackthorn would sometimes be used to decorate the apple trees in traditional wassailing rituals, which I have covered in the folklore of the apple tree. To receive prophecies from the fairy realm, brave or perhaps even foolish folks would sleep beneath blackthorn trees. But as with so much in fairy lore, this blessing would come with a sting, just like the thorn. As with fairy, it too is dual-natured. In one folk story from Ireland, a farmer has all the corn of his field stolen. He's left with nothing. He fell asleep between the boughs of a blackthorn, and as he dreams he hears a voice telling the fairy folk have stolen his corn, and also giving him instructions of how to get it back. Carefully he follows the prophecy's instructions, and eventually all of his corn is returned. However, the sting in the tale is that any animal that ate from this corn would sicken and soon die. An old saying describes the dual nature of both fairies and blackthorn. Better the bramble than the blackthorn, better the blackthorn than the devil. The bramble was better than the blackthorn any day, but given the choice, the blackthorn was nowhere near as bad or as dangerous as the devil. In the 4 countries that make up the United Kingdom and also in Brittany, The blackthorn is most definitely the tree of witchcraft and witches. Even to this day, some country folk are wary of the tree, refusing even a twig of it to be brought inside a home because this could bring death or strife. Dartmoor folk would wonder, how are the Sloanes doing, with one wary eye always on how many sloe berries would fill the branches of blackthorn bushes and trees. Many sloes would bring sickness, a harsh winter and many deaths. Many Sloanes, they would say, many groans. And yet for bridal couples their evening chamber would be decorated with a combination of hawthorn and blackthorn flowers if married in May, the sickly sweet scent of both blossoms believing to bring fertility and desire. Sadly for those deemed witches during the era of the witch trials and the persecution of the innocents under these horrific times, the blackthorn tree, probably because of its association with witches and magic, would be used for the pyres and the fires that would take their lives most cruelly in those countries where fire was used for this purpose. Heretics were also subject to burning over blackthorn wood. John Clare, the poet and writer, described a strange ritual in the Shepherd's Calendar in 1827, one from Wales, which I will tell as he wrote it. Lastly, a few of the wells in that part of Gwynedd may be grouped together and described as oracular. One of these, the big well in the parish of Llanbedroch in Llain, as I learned from Martin Fard, required the devotee to kneel by it and avow his faith in it. When this had been duly done, he might proceed in this wise. To ascertain, for instance, the name of a thief who had stolen from him, he had to throw a bit of bread into the well and name the person who he suspected. At the name of the thief, the bread would sink, so the inquirer went on naming all of the persons he could think of until the bit of bread sank. When the thief was identified, how far is one to suppose that we have here traces of the influences of the water ordeal common in the Middle Ages? Another well of the same kind was Vinan Sathan in Llanvigal, Bachatath parish, also in Llain, for lovers to throw pins, pinau, into the well. These pins appear to have been the points of the blackthorn. At any rate, they cannot well have been any kind of metal, as we are told that if they sank in the water, one concluded that one's lover was not sincere in his or her love. Here it was customary, as he had it in writing. For the Welsh Celtic people, the blackthorn was considered one of the most important trees. Superstition and folklore abounded about this darker magical tree and its sister, the lighter magical hawthorn. During the festival of Calnhaff, between summer and winter, a mock battle would be fought between a man dressed as the spirit of winter and one dressed as the spirit of summer. Echoes here of the Cunningham breed abound, and for those who have listened to my episode of the folklore of the oak tree, there are echoes too of the battle of the oak and the holly kings. The winter warrior would carry a staff of blackthorn, as does the Cailleach, and a shield decorated with gathered sheep's wool to represent the snows. Summer's warrior carried a willow wand, and his accessories were flowers and bright-coloured ribbons. Battle would commence, the followers of winter throwing dried straw into the battle, representing fallow times of withered hardship, and summer's followers would throw flowers and fern fronds and birch. Of course, it being a May Day festival, summer would always win, and the king and the queen of the May were chosen, and revelries and feasting would carry on well into the night. Peculiarly, and I know not why, the Mayor of Sandwich in Kent carries a blackthorn wand as part of mayoral tradition at ceremonies. In 1825, William Cobbett, a Surrey-based journalist, described superstitions about blackthorn winter. He said, "It is a remarkable fact that there is always, that is, every year of our lives, a spell of cold and angry weather, just at the time this hardy little tree is in bloom. The country people call it the blackthorn winter, and thus it has been called, I dare say, by all the inhabitants of this island from generation to generation for 1,000 years. In Germany, the blackthorn was used for divining rods, and is known as the wishing thorn. However, in another tradition from Germany, We learn that blackthorn grew from the blood of the heathens who had been killed in battles. Easter fires at festivals were named for the tree, as it was the thorn wood that was used as kindling for bonfires. Heading to Ireland and the legend of Dermot and Grane, one section tells us that Save ate sloes and became pregnant. Her son was born with a lump upon his head, and this was found to be a snake or a worm. In the tale, the snake is killed as a sacrifice. Another tale, The Sword of Oscar, also records that sloes were spoken of in terms of sacrifice, often the death of a great warrior, a favourite of the king who is killed defending his tribe. In witchcraft folklore and belief, the blackthorn is associated with the darker arts due to its historical spiritual connection to the Caliph, and winter and strife. As the Caliph connection, it is associated to the triple goddess and to the crone aspect of this, to dark moons and secretive or destructive magic. A blackthorn rod would be created, a wand, and used for binding and blasting spells and curses. Thorns fixed to the end of the wand would emphasise the intention of causing harm to those whom the spell was directed at. Puppet dolls used in English magical rituals would be pricked and stuck with blackthorn thorns, pins of slumber they were known as. And in South Devon folklore, witches used walking sticks carved from blackthorn, these sticks being used to walk but also to direct their spells. In Edinburgh in Scotland in 1670, a witch burning took place. Major Thomas Weir was put to death, and his blackthorn staff was burned along with him. This staff was carved with the image of a satyr, devil-like, and had immense magical power, even reputed to be able to travel through the air. Weir told tales that the devil had given him this staff, but it's actually far more likely it was given to him as a gift while he was serving in the military in Ireland. Major Weir was a Covenanter, known as a devout man and a preacher, to the point that people would come from miles around to listen to his sermons. However, during one of these sermons, the congregation was astounded and absolutely horrified when he confessed publicly that he had for many years been having relations with his own sister Jean. His reputation as well as hers were finished. It was an appalling confession, sinning with the devil, and both were tried and condemned to the worst punishment possible, and so to the fires they would go along with the blackthorn staff. To this very day his ghost is said to haunt the West Bow area of Edinburgh. As an occult tool of magic, the blackthorn was prized overall for dark rituals, and even in more mischievous matters, the thorns were hidden under saddles of horses to cause them to buck and rear, as the thorns pricked the skin, the intention to have the horse throw its rider and cause injury. In the Museum of Witchcraft in Boscastle in Cornwall, in the southwest of England, a blackthorn wand is held in its collection. This still has its original spikes and was intended to rid the owner of unwanted things. I can thoroughly recommend a visit to this specialised museum for anyone visiting Cornwall. For witches, blackthorn spells were meant for protection, ridding negativity and enemies, and for purification, and once again we have the themes of strife leading to new awareness and rebirth. In Herefordshire, farmers would burn a blackthorn bush to act as a charm against mould and mildew attacking the wheat. Farm workers would rise before the break of day, just as the seedling wheat was starting to poke its tiny leaves above the soil. They would cut a branch from a thorn bush and construct a fire in the field. Part of the branch would be burned, and the rest they would hang within the farm cottage. And so the blackthorn, a beautiful little tree with a very difficult reputation, definitely dual-natured, but should we be wary of this hedgerow beauty? Well, no. Common sense and respect for nature tells us now that we should treat all living things with care, and not overpick the fruit or take too many branches. And strife comes to all of us, doesn't it? And this is part of our human condition. Sadnesses teach us that we have to appreciate happier times, and there are usually happier times. I think it is this that is the blackthorn's job to remind us, that following the darkness comes light and hope, and a beautiful white blossom possibly tinged with pink. Finally, I am going to leave you with the poem of the Blackthorn by Cicely Mary Barker. The wind is cold, the spring seems long awaking, the woods are brown and bare, yet this is March, soon April will be making all things most sweet and fair. See, even now in hedge and thicket tangled, one brave and cheering sight, the leafless branches of the blackthorn spangled with starry blossoms white. I hope you've enjoyed our little look at the folklore of Blackthorn. I'm pondering which of our beautiful trees to do next. These tree episodes take me an age to research and put together. To be honest, all of the long form episodes do. But for specific trees or animals, birds, flowers and such, I want to pack in as much as I can find as possible. So they take a while, but I think it's worth it, and I enjoy searching through our old books for information and hints of the folklore. Thank you so much for supporting our little channel. We are not a monetised channel, so growing it is slow business. Understandably, YouTube does prioritise monetised channels over non-advertisement ones, and at the end of the day they have to make money to keep it all going. I totally understand that. Why aren't we monetised, some people have asked me. Well, I don't think it would be fair yet, until I can be more regular with the videos. And we are setting in place a lot of changes this year, which will mean eventually I can be more regular and be monetised. Every follow and every like and every watch is hugely appreciated. It really is, by both of us. On that note, dear friends, have a wonderful week or weekend, and until next time, take care. Brightest of blessings, and remember, don't play with the fairy folk, or you may end up in one of my folk tales yourself.